Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second afternoon session on AI and employment. So Daniel and I, when we designed this, we designed one session about the science and one about its applications. So what we have here this afternoon are four people who are talking about the impacts of AI in the real world. First of which is Christian here. He's the head of wealth management operations at Deutsche Bank. Thank you for coming here, Christian. The floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. So you'll see there's a certain number of slides that I'm just going to go very quickly through because they explain like where I come from and a little bit what RPA and AI is, which I think after 3 days you guys should know. So not knowing exactly what was going to be presented before my presentation, I just put them in there. So very quickly, I've been working for my whole life, more or less, in banks, project management, a lot of technology at UBS, then at Banque Continentale de Genève, and then at DB. And now I'm since 2014, so about 6 years, head of operations, something a bit different, but which has a high link to IT because in the end, operations uses a lot of technology. I'm responsible for Europe, meaning that I cover a certain number of countries, including Saudi Arabia, which is part of Europe for us. 140 employees and about 30 million budget, mostly in people, actually, because technology is paid somewhere else. Just as the goal of what I'm presenting today is from my perspective and from a practical perspective, the impact of robotics and/or artificial intelligence on people, actually. And I'll take you through a bit of those. I'll skip because I think you know what automation is. What I wanted to show is a little bit, what you see in the newspaper, on the web. We've seen a lot of alarming news saying, there's going to be a lot of job losses. There's going to be major crisis related to the deployment of AI and robots. Our experience at Deutsche Bank is that it's not the case, and it's not because it's Deutsche Bank. I think it's general. I mean, we're not better than anybody else. It's just, it has a certain number of impacts, but those can be mitigated. And what I want to explain today is what do we as a bank or as a corporation need to do in order to reduce the impact of robots and of artificial intelligence on the people that work for us. One thing I wanted to show is, first of all, what is different in the latest industry revolution that we're living with artificial intelligence. If you look at the history of industry revolutions, they are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. The cycles are going shorter and shorter, which means that for the human, the capacity to adapt is getting stronger and stronger. Also, what we see is that we're moving away from replacing muscles with machines, which were the first two industry changes, to replacing brains with machines. Obviously, there are some similarities. And I remember when I was at university, we were talking already about the impact of industrial revolution around resistance to change, skill set inadequacy, or even the fear of losing jobs because you don't know what's coming. But when you start working with brains, it has a lot of other impacts, mainly which has to do with the loss of knowledge. All of a sudden, what you were doing is all of a sudden done by the machine. So the knowledge that you had as an employee is all of a sudden partially lost. You also lose this kind of easy jobs. Especially in banks, maybe I shouldn't say that, but we had a lot of people doing repetitive jobs, which were relatively easy. And all of a sudden, those jobs are disappearing. Obviously, this is slightly similar to what we used to have when we had the mechanical industry changing because you were doing, banging on something and all of a sudden somebody else is doing it for you. But still, it changes a lot. Plus, it introduces a lot of new risks. Because obviously, if a process, which is invisible, because in the end it's a computer, so it's a black box, is being done outside of your control for a bank, and from a control point of view, you introduce a lot of new risks. Before that, you had a piece of paper, you could see what was being done, and all of a sudden, you don't. The robot is doing it. And if there's a bug in a robot, the production will be wrong without anybody knowing it. So all this has changed a lot, the way we manage people. And this is why I wanted to explain a little bit in 4 pieces. First of all, what do we need when we hire people? So what are the skills that are required in a robotized AI environment? Then how do we manage those people? How do we retain those people? And also how do we train those people? This is a little bit what I want to go through. So first of all, what are the skills that are going to be in demand in an AI robotized environment? And you'll see my view, and this is a personal view, honestly, but I think it's what you see in general. A lot of stuff has to do with soft skills. Soft skills will be much more in demand than before. You won't need people who are, you will still need a little bit, but not as much as today, people who are highly skilled in math, for example. Good computers, even look at ourselves. Today we use Excel. You don't need to be a guru in math to draw a very nice chart and to have very complex VLOOKUPs. So this is going to go away. You need leadership. One thing which we will see also in the management, until now, a lot of the managers, what they were doing is they were not managing, they were controlling. They were looking at, filling out signatures and paying bills, but they were not managing. They were hiding behind their management function. Now robots are going to take that away, and that's a big change. You will need also people who are able to work with much more, a larger variety of people, so interpersonal skills, diversity, cultural intelligence, because those are things that robots will never do. They will never be able to differentiate between working with an Italian or working with a German. They just work. And you as a manager or you as an employee, you need to be able to cope with those different cultures in order to make the company successful. Those are the kind of soft skills that are really important. So what do we need to do when we start the journey with an employee? The first part, obviously, is the recruiting. So as I said, soft skills for me are much more important than hard skills. One of the big challenges there, from my experience, is that it's very difficult to recruit or in an interview to really be able to identify soft skills. Obviously, hard skills are easy because therefore there you have diplomas or you can see what they've been doing in their previous jobs. Soft skills, try to test them in an interview. Personally, I haven't had a lot of luck so far. It's kind of complicated. We also need people who understand the process end to end. Until now, what I see, a lot of people, they're focused on their piece of the work. So, especially in banks where we have relatively lengthy processes, somebody was doing, I'm controlling, for example, anti-money laundering, as to give an example which probably everybody hopefully understands. So I'm just controlling anti-money laundering, but what happens before or what happens after is not my problem. Once we introduce robots, pieces of that process will be done by robots or by artificial intelligence. So we will need somebody to understand the end-to-end chain. Because if he doesn't, then you have, first of all, the risk of having some of those pieces not working properly, plus you will not know how to fit into the whole process. We need to move also from specialist to analyst, because the robot is going to be the specialist. He's the one who is going to day in, day out do your process. But what about when he breaks? When he breaks, you need to have somebody who has the capacity to go back at the beginning of the process and go through it, go through the analyze the data. What went wrong? Why it went wrong? What do we need to correct? So this is also something new. Again, end-to-end processes, the documentation. I think a lot of people I see are not used to documenting process. They know what they do, but when you ask them, okay, can you put this on a piece of paper? Then they're like kind of lost. So documenting is really important. Get out of your comfort zone. I guess that's something that's important for every single job, but is even more important in a robotized environment, because obviously the robots and the impact it will have on our job will continue to change. And we need to be able to change also. And that's the last 2 points, to change also. Now, once you've hired the person, you want him to stay with you. You don't want him to move out to another company, especially if you spent a lot of money on training him. So what do we need to do to retain our staff? We need to make sure they are constantly educated. And that's really a point, and you'll see it comes up in a lot of the slides. Education is key in this environment that moves a lot. And actually, and this is probably when I'm not going to make a lot of friends with the PFL and the uni teachers, I think the model of education we currently have has to change also, but we'll come to that a little bit later. We need, as employers, to anticipate change. So don't wait until the robot is here to say, okay, now that I've got the robot, I've got to fire 10 people, what am I going to do? Anticipate that. You know, as a manager at least, that you're going to implement robotics in 1-2 years. It doesn't come from today to tomorrow. Once you start that thought process, we need to think about what we want to do with our people. We need to redeploy them, change them, adapt them, see if they can fit into a new model. Can we move them to other tasks? If you don't do that, then obviously people are either going to leave or they're going to end up being without a job, which is also not what you want. This goes also into the same with aligning your long-term strategy in terms of workforce with the strategy of the bank in terms of digital. It has nothing to do with business, but really, where are we going? Where are we going to be, Deutsche Bank, in 3, 4, 5 years in terms of digital? And based on that, I will do my recruitment. Doesn't mean that I will today have everybody that is fit for what I need in 5 years, but we need to think about that. If you don't, then you're going to have either huge knowledge gaps at a certain point in time, or you're just going to have lack of people because people will have left. And last point is work with HR. Obviously, can talk about compensation. There's certain models that need to be implemented also to retain staff in an ever-changing environment. This is a bit more difficult, and personally, at least at Deutsche Bank, we haven't found any specific model, but I'm sure maybe in certain companies, it's something that they're starting to think about. How can we, in such a changing environment, but also this disruptive environment, can we adapt compensation? Personally, I don't have a solution, but I think it's something that HR should be thinking about. Now, you've got your people, you have done what you can to retain them. How do you motivate them? How do you motivate them to give their maximum and keep on growing the company? I see 4 quadrants, if we want, I mean, they're not quadrants, 4 areas where we need to be careful. And this has also to do with the way you implement RPA and artificial intelligence. First of all, explain to the people why you're doing it. It's really critical. And I've seen this, I mean, you can apply this actually not only to AI or RPA, but you can apply it to any kind of change. Why am I, poor employee, being impacted by? Why did the bank decide to do this? What's in it for me as an employee? And honestly, there is positive discussions to have around robotics with people, but you need to have them. And again, you need to have them a bit in advance. Don't do it the day they're being fired. Do it, when you're implementing the project. Also, demystify what is robotics. It's not a bad, robot that is going to come and take over your job. You need to explain what you're doing, why you're doing it. So this is really important. The second piece is train. And again, you see it almost on every single side. I think the training aspect is really important. Support people in reskilling. If you know where the people are going to move, support them for that. Make them become lifelong learners. People need to learn ongoing. It's really, really important. I saw something on a website, I don't remember exactly which one, which was saying that the half-life of skill has dropped from 30 years to an average of 6 years. So probably what you're learning is probably going to be worth 6 years, and maybe in a few years it will be worth maybe 1 or 2 years. So this means that we as managers, and the employees need to constantly learn new stuff, or else you're going to be dead. Make training part of the job also. Obviously, and this is probably one of the I would want to call it flaw, but the downsides of big banks is that they don't have as much money as they used to have, and now they don't give you such big trainings as they used to. So now what's happening is you need to train on the job. But I think as managers, it is something that is important as a corporation. We need to train people on the job, meaning people turn around, go to other jobs. It's actually a bit facilitated with AI and RPA because you need less technical knowledge. You can move from one job to the other if you're smart enough. Create job rotation. Really, that's critical. Create new job profiles. Change the profile of the jobs. Don't stay with what you have today. And one thing which is also interesting is resource knowledge. Until now, what we've been doing is we've been sending our knowledge to India, to other low-cost locations. With robotics, we have the opportunity to bring it back in, especially because we're going to have the end-to-end process. So if we bring it back in, then we can understand the whole process. And this is also very motivating for the people versus saying, oh, half of it is anyway done in India, so I don't really care about it. Document. This is one thing where when I was talking about the skills, which I said was really important, we need to document what we do. And this is, why does it fit into motivating is because if a process is properly documented for the end user, it's a lot more motivating to understand what he's doing, why he's doing it, how it fits into the whole process. Also, one thing which we do, and this is something I would recommend everybody to do, go manual once in a while. Because if you rely for 10 years on a robot and all of a sudden the robot fails, you're dead. Because nobody knows how to do it manually anymore. So you need to go manual once in a while. And also, instead of thinking about roles, Let's think about workflows, and this is what goes back into documentation also. So instead of having somebody look at one process, have him look at one function. And if you do job shadowing, which means you follow somebody in his day-to-day life, don't follow the person, follow the process throughout the day. And last point, in the implementation, when you implement robotics, have clear objectives. Really, don't be blunt about it. Explain why you're implementing this. Break it down into small steps. I think that's something which is project management. You do it in every project. Create a POC, so a proof of concept. Identify ambassadors, and this is really something which goes back to explaining. If you have people who are convinced that it's a good thing for the bank, they're probably going to talk to their friends, talk to their colleagues, and it's going to make it a lot easier to be implemented. And also, start with the painful tasks. There are things which nobody likes to do. It's always like that. If you are able to robotize or artificially intelligence those tasks, people will say, hey, actually, in the end, there's something for me. I don't have every morning to push 200 times a button, which I don't like to do. I would rather do something where my brains work a little bit. If we do that, then it helps a lot in motivating the teams in adapting the robots or artificial intelligence. Training, I just wanted to give one practical example because a lot of what I'm saying here is personal experiences, but it's not something that we've formally implemented. But we are piloting a digital transformation program in Singapore currently, which is called BOOST, which stands for Build, Operate, Own, Share, and Transform, where we're trying to train our teams in the operations to understand, think for the future. And it's really starting. So it started actually like short before Christmas. So we don't have a lot of experience. So I can't give you a lot of feedback on how it went. But I think just the fact that we decided to organize that, to give people the opportunity to be trained, to understand and to change their mindset towards artificial intelligence and robotics is a critical piece. And I think a lot of companies will go down that path. Now, as I wanted to talk a little bit also about how AI impacts the way I manage as a manager, as a senior manager. As I said before, AI will remove a lot of the administrative tasks that we were doing before as managers. So now you have, as a manager, to focus on high added value. You cannot hide behind your desk and say, oh, I can't see you. I have 25 other bills that I need to sign. No, that's done. You don't have to look at it. So now you have to really be a real manager, meaning work with people, be creative, be what the AI cannot offer. If, over time, AI is going to bring more and more decisions directly to your table. But in the end, decision maker, you are the one. So to do that, you need to change and to shift the way you take your decisions. Don't take them like a robot, because for that, we don't need you, but take them, be creative, look into more integrated solutions, depending on the kind of factors that maybe artificial intelligence cannot take into account. Also, it's a little bit in the same topic, you will get a lot more data as a manager, obviously, because AI produces a mass of information. So as a manager, you need to be able to understand that data. So you also need to learn to manage with a lot bigger amount of data. Also, it can help you give a lot more feedback to your client, to your employees. Before that, when I was at UBS 25 years ago, I remember the boss, he would see you maybe once a quarter, give you a few figures, because that was the speed at which he was getting the data. So the feedback was coming on a quarterly basis. Now he has dashboards, or I have dashboards every day. So I can talk to my team and say, hey, I'm looking, I can see that this is not working. What are we doing today? Not in 3 months, not in 5 months. This changes a lot the way you as a manager need to interact. And last but not least, and this is probably a negative point, but we need to manage towards it, AI will reduce collective knowledge, because a part of the knowledge will go into the robot. So over time, you will lose it. So how do you as a manager still ensure that you retain enough knowledge within the bank or within the company? Treat robots as colleagues. It's kind of a funny thing, but it really works. We've done it. All our robots have names. They all have an ID. If you look them up on the directory, you find them. We gave them funny names, but still, it's nothing. It's like kind of geeky, but it's part of the game. But it does help, and they really work with us. Ensure knowledge is not lost. That's why you need documentation. That's why you need to run the processes yourselves once in a while. And develop social skills. The idea behind that is that as a team, you have the knowledge, but even though part of the is taken up by AI, so you need to have that network of knowledge so that people amongst each other can communicate and reduce this loss of collective knowledge. And last but not least, what I wanted to explain also a little bit is how can cooperation and the state contribute? And actually, it's probably going to be a good transition to the presentation afterwards. We need, obviously, closer collaboration between government and corporation. It's moving very fast. We have corporations that have pretty strong AI visions, but how does that fit in with what the government is doing in terms of education, in terms of, how do you say that? Chômage. Unemployment, in terms of fixing wages. This is really critical. And I've seen a very interesting article about China that has, probably it's a bit easier because they have an economy that is pretty much government driven, but they are working with all the technologies companies in China to build a common AI vision. I don't think this is happening in Europe currently. Education system needs to evolve, and this is where I'm be dodging maybe a few bullets. But I think personally that the education system we have today in classical Europe or in the United States is probably not fit completely for the future. We need to work a lot more on soft skills. Hard skills will be taken over or partially taken over by robots. So people need to come on the market with a lot more soft skills. We need to complement AI and not compete with it. It doesn't make any sense. And I think today we're still in this competition with AI. I also read something which was really interesting. 65% of the children entering primary school today will end up working in jobs that do not exist today. If you think about that, there's a gap in the education. They're being trained on jobs that don't exist. So when they will come on the market, they will not be adequately staffed or armed with the right skill sets. And this is probably a much broader topic, is the whole social security aspect. How do we ensure that the impact, because it will have some impact. Yeah, we all agree. I think I've heard a lot of conferences today that there will be a positive impact, but there will, as usual, always be some leftovers or some people that will drop through the system. How do we ensure that those people don't get completely lost? And let's not forget that the impact will be different. The first and the second and the third revolution impacted mostly low-level wages. From my perspective, and from what I've seen, it's the middle class that's going to be hit. Also, from a macro point of view, low labor cost countries will be impacted because today, and that's what I said at the beginning, we offshore to India. Today, it's cheaper for me to resource in Switzerland, use a robot, and get rid of the Indians. So those people will be impacted also. Taxation models needs to be maybe redefined. Again, those are broader topics, but I think it's universal basic income is also a question we can ask. As a conclusion, I'm running over my time, so I'll be very quick. But I think AI will kill certain categories, but create new ones. Really, training, from my perspective, is really critical, and this is something where each of us and at Deutsche Bank, we try to work on that, is really critical. We need to work together with the various governments in order to anticipate change. And even as a company, internally, whenever you implement robotics or artificial intelligence, you need to plan really well ahead. Those projects take years to be implemented. So it is critical that you think strategically, even if it's a small team, it doesn't have to be at the bank level, but with your team, where am I going? What am I changing? Why am I changing this? What is it going to mean for my people? And how do I make sure that my teams can be redeployed, retrained, reskilled, so that they can survive or at least thrive in the new environment. And you need to finish with the Dilbert joke. So even if you are only drinking coffee, you're still at risk at losing your job.